This is the last meeting of the very old men who helped to take 1/4 of the Earth's surface for the British Empire. These are the last living soldiers of Queen Victoria. You are looking at the faces of men who, in the autumn of 1899, armed with Lee Enfield rifles, began to sail from Britain to southern Africa to fight the Boers of the Orange Free State and the Transvaal Republic. The youngest veteran present is 90 years old. The standard of the South African Veterans Association is laid down for the last time. The ceremony of handing out Christmas cheer.
Thank you. And now, veterans, we come to the main reason of our meeting here today. This is the letter to Sir Michael Adine, Private Secretary to Her Majesty the Queen. Dear Sir Michael, I am writing as President of the South African War Veterans Association, of which Her Majesty the Queen is our gracious patron, to ask you to convey to Her Majesty our humble duty and to inform her that owing to old age and physical infirmities, we are obliged to stand down our association in its 70th year. Please assure Her Majesty that the oath of allegiance we gave to Her Majesty Queen Victoria has been constant to her successors to the present day. We humbly beg Her Majesty to accept our lasting loyalty, and we pray Her Majesty will be long spared to reign over her loyal subjects.
Rudyard Kipling once referred to those old men as the gentlemen in khaki. He also called them the sons of the blood, meaning the sons of the British breed. They are the very last of Drake's men, of Marlborough's men, of the Duke of Wellington's men, and they personally fought for Kitchener of Khartoum and Field Marshal Lord Roberts of Kandahar.
Please assure Her Majesty that the oath of allegiance we gave to Her Majesty Queen Victoria has been constant to her successors to the present day. I will now read to you the reply I received from Buckingham Palace, from the Privy Purse Office. Dear Colonel Lang, the Queen is sorry to hear that your association is now standing down, but of course fully appreciates the reasons. The Queen particularly asks me to thank you for your loyal messages. Signed, Tryon.
Tryon, I understand, is Lord Tryon, Keeper Her Majesty the Queen's Privy Purse. And that letter, I presume, from Tryon will be the last royal response to the winners of the empire upon which the sun never set.
Boer War Memorial, Pall Mall, London. There are many hundreds of these commemorations throughout Britain, but few people notice them.
In 1899, England demanded suzerainty, that is, ultimate power over the independent Boer Republic of the Transvaal in South Africa. Now, England wasn't simply interested in power for power's sake, but English business was interested in the biggest gold fields that the world has ever known at Johannesburg in the middle of the Transvaal. England said that you would only go to war against the Transvaal for the democratic rights of the British gold miners and British men of business at Johannesburg. But few people outside of England believe that old story.
In the Republic of South Africa, I talked to outstraders, that is, Boer veterans who had fought us in 1899. The first was Meneer Prinsloo. I asked him, through an interpreter, if the Boers had wanted this war.
Nee, ons hier weg heeft die gedachte wat ons zo gehad het.
No, when we left here, we weren't in favor of the war. We had confidence that President Kruger and General Erasmus and those people would calm the situation. They weren't for the war. They wanted to try and settle things, you see. And so we were downhearted, man, because of what was going to happen to us.
Van ons tegenstanderse kant.
Meneer Kokemoor, Boer soldier, now aged 103.
I think the English, they wanted to get the Transvaal, and the Boers didn't want that. So they said, now we will fight them, and they fought.
Meneer van der Westhuizen, Cape Rebel volunteer.
We were surprised. We never believed that the war would start, because Queen Victoria wouldn't allow it. She was for the Boers. That means she was justice. It is Miller, they were after the gold. They don't care who they destroy as long as they get the gold and diamonds.
You feel that the businessmen, that the English businessmen in South Africa brought Britain into the war?
That's it. Now you're taking the name. That's the businessman that brought England into the war.
Meneer Van Wyk, Boer officer.
Which man? Milner. And that because he was a man like that, he was absolutely a madman.
Sir Alfred Milner, British High Commissioner in South Africa.
Miller and Rhodes, this is the guilty man. There's the gold hunters, but not the British. From England, we respected our Queen, Victoria. I mean, you couldn't respect a person more than that.
That is the truth. She was a peaceful person, but the statesmen were bloodthirsty. They wanted the war, and they wanted to grab the land for Britain, and they did.
Have you heard how centuries ago, boys, young John Bull all at once began to grow, boys, learned to walk and packing up his things, broke away from Mammy's apron strings, joined in the scramble, sailing far and wide, building an empire way beyond the tide. Spaniards and Dutchmen both were in the race, great were the odds, yet Johnny found a place. For he meant to have a pull, did young John Bull. He found it wouldn't do to lie in bed, and this plucky little chap soon began to paint the map with an ever-growing patch of red.
You will have noticed that we've called our house Spion Kop. Spion Kop was the scene of a famous British disaster in this Second Boer War.
If they want to get the pull on old John Bull, they'll have to get up early out of bed. If again they have a slap, we shall paint a certain map with another little patch of red.
This is the story of the taking of the British Empire. With these books and what have you, I have learned to love many of the old soldiers of the Empire, hate most of the old politicians of the Empire, and positively loathe all of the businessmen of the Empire.
If we want to hold the pull, then old John Bull ever wide awake must be and look ahead. For if e'er we take a nap, foes will wipe from off the map every precious little patch of red.
Of course, over this question of morals and ethics, we British generally believed ourselves to be in the right. Whatever they did and however they did it, they had to make it look like a decent game of cricket. Indeed, strangest of all, they seemed to believe that it was a decent game of cricket. Oh, we haven't changed much, have we? Anyway, the old soldiers gave many different reasons for going to war.
Mr. Saunderson was a British volunteer soldier from Northumberland, and I asked him if it was a good war for us to have fought or a bad war.
Oh, definitely, I thought it was a good war. There's no question about that.
Why?
I never liked the way the coup went on. I don't even like the way that's been carried on today, the way that the niggers are treated. We had no say in this world when we came into it, whether we wanted to be black or white. And I think that they shouldn't be overridden the way they are overridden the niggers.
Yes. Was that the prime reason that you felt that you should go to the war in 1900?
I think, well, to tell you the truth, I looked forward to the change of occupation altogether. That's what I looked for. I wanted to be a soldier.
Mr. Rowden was a regular soldier, a British Fusilier.
Father was a soldier. Grandfather was a soldier. And I wanted to follow their footsteps. Can you?
Do you think that we should have fought them?
Well, it had to be. And being a soldier, I did think it was time it was stopped.
You had no choice, really, did you?
No choice.
I had a brother in the Rifle Brigade. He had the Chitral Medal, see, and I thought, I'll get a medal the same as him. See? He was an older brother than me.
Why did you want to join the army, Mr. Gofton?
The lads will get enlisted now. What for, I cannot tell. But I thought I'd be a soldier, just to look a happy swell. With a bob a day, and out a day, and plenty beef and beer. I thought I'd be a soldier, but I'm taken in, that's clear.
I asked Colonel Bertram Lang, now aged 93 years, what his feelings had been.
We were very bucked because we realized we had been selected as a regiment to go out to a war, which after all is what a soldier's there for. And in those days, it was very difficult to earn a medal anywhere. And in fact, fellows used to go out to West Africa and the Northwest frontier in order to get a little bit of battle experience. Therefore, naturally, we were very bucked at being selected to go out to the South African War.
Could you say that you disliked the Boers?
Yes, I could say that. I could say that, the way they went on. They didn't face up to it. They would run away, you know, they're always on their own. That was our trouble, we couldn't keep up with them.
Of course, it was a bit clever of them to keep out of the way of your bullets.
They hadn't the strength. I remember once at a dinner before we went away from Morpeth, we all had to say a few remarks at this dinner that was given to us before we went out. And there was a man from Pegswood, he was a pitman from Pegswood, that he was going out, and he was in kilt. And his speech was this: I hear that these Boers were going to fight. There were holes in the mountains. He said, if that's so, when I get there, he pulled out his bayonet, he says, I'll hawk the buggers out like woollicks.
I suppose it was out of the question for you to have asked the rights and wrongs of the war.
Oh, heavens no. I don't think the idea would never have entered your head. You didn't know the rights, the wrongs. The only things we'd heard of was the Jemison raid. We'd heard that all the English people out there were being exploited. The money was being taken. They were making all the money, and they hadn't any say in the government whatsoever. It never entered our head that we were given the order to go, and we'd go. I don't think we ever went into the politics of the thing at all. I never did.
But the question of right and wrong has entered Mr. Moyer's head.
Do you think that we were right to have fought the Boers?
No, very definitely not. We weren't fighting the Boers. Well, we had to fight them because they were resisting us. We went there to take their country from them, wanted to take their minerals. their gold and their diamonds and anything and everything that they had. It was precious to them. Now then, come to present day. Hitler wanted to do the same with us. Am I right?
Yes.
We were threatened with it. Now, what would we have done? What would you have done had you seen a German walking down the street and you had a firearm in your possession? What would you do? Pop him off? You wouldn't go and shake hands with him, would you? No. That's the way they treated us. When they captured our fellows, especially we volunteers, we ought never to have had the chance to come back home. We went there to take that country from them, and if they kicked our nonsense about it, well, we just shoot them down, which we did. No.
So on that occasion, in your opinion, Britain was on the wrong side?
I think so, because our Prime Minister then was Joy Chamberlain, you know, and he was a big man with Kynox ammunition people and VSA rifle people, and we were using his rifles, Lee Medford, Lee Enfield.
I saw Diamante is so far from my heart, and I'm longing to see her again. She lived on a farm on the Moy River banks before I left on this campaign. Bring my terug na die ou Transvaal, daar waar my Sari woon, daar onder in die mielies by die groen doringboom, daar woon my Sari Marais.
President Kruger, the old Puritan leader of the Transvaal, marshaled his Boers, his farmers, to meet the armies of the British Empire. Without hesitation, the people of the neighboring Orange Free State, under their President Steyn, decided to fight with the Boers of the Transvaal on the simple principle of freedom. Grandfathers, fathers, and many children took up guns to meet the British. On October 11th, 1899, the war began, and the United Boer forces invaded British territory in Natal and in the Cape.
How old was Prinsloo then? Hoe oud was geweest, wil hy graag weet?
17 jaar.
He was 17 when they left the farm.
Ja.
Did your mother think it was a good thing that you went off to fight when you were 17?
My moeder het nie kan ek nie Engels.
Je praat Afrikaans, ja.
My moeder.
My mother never spoke much about such matters.
En sulke sake nie.
Ja.
She only said to me, "My child, we live in an important time, a very important time." My mother didn't say much. She did her housework.
Wel, ja. My gevoel was toe ek
My feelings when I left with my father were very heavy-hearted, very heavy-hearted.
baie swaar.
My heart was heavy because I was a young child. I was taken out of school. How do you say it? I was a boy and rode around on a lovely horse to see the girls. You understand? And those things were over, and I had to go to join the commando. All those girls, I felt very bad.
And the sons of the British blood, Colonel Lang, in 1899, Lieutenant Lang of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders.
We hadn't any idea, and of course, in those days, how long the war was going to last. Like the First World War, you remember they used to say, oh, we'll be back by Christmas, and nonsense like that. The thing went on for 3 years or more. But still, we were very bucked, and there was another regiment in the barracks, at Richmond Barracks with us in Dublin. I think it was the South Wales Borderers, and they were very jealous of us, really. But they were very nice fellows, and they gave us a terrific breakfast on our special train that took us down to Queenstown when we embarked. And the night before, I need hardly say, we had a very big farewell party in their mess.
Of course, we didn't know much about fighting. we didn't know much about generals. I didn't bother to tell you the truth. So recruiting sergeant said, what do you want to join? I said, a lot that gets the most money. So he said, all right, RAMC. And at that time, there was a big call for medicals. I didn't know that. And in 6 months, I'd been to the Queen's funeral. I'd joined the RAMC at Netley Hospital, and then was drafted out to South Africa on the SS Aurania.
And then the war broke out, and of course, being a young fellow and full of energy and that sort of thing, I looked forward to it. I thought it was a grand thing to get an outfit like that, and I went and joined up. But before you joined up, you had to be able to shoot. And believe me, at the 200 yards, when you had to stand up with these Lee Enfield rifles and shoot, standing up, I was shooting badly at the 200 yards. But lying down and shooting at the 500 yards, I was putting on bullseyes.
I see. Now.
And I passed.
It was an ominous fact that the Boers, the enemy, were perhaps the finest marksmen with rifles and the finest horsemen in the world. Nevertheless, after very basic training, these British volunteers set off.
We went to Waterloo Station, yes. We had a band to escort us there and took us right down to Southampton when we boarded the Royal Mail steamer Minho, M-I-N-H-O, bound for like one of the absent-minded beggars, you know. You know, that's Kipling's absent-minded beggars, 40,000 horse and foot, ordered at Table Bay, cooks and dukes and son of about a dern, You don't know it?
I do, as a matter of fact. Do you know any more of it?
No, I wish I could get a hold of a copy of it.
Well, I'll make it my business. I'll let you have a copy.
Thanks very much.
When you've shouted Rule Britannia, when you've sung God Save the Queen, when you've finished killing Kruger with your mouth, will you please to put a penny in my little tambourine?
For the absent-minded beggar ordered south.
Correct, sir.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. Or a gentleman in khaki ordered south.
A gentleman in khaki, is it? No, well, yours truly.
So from Britain, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, India, and from every country in the vast empire, regular soldiers and volunteers landed at the South African ports and moved northwards. It had been decided by others that Johnny Boer and Tommy Atkins should kill each other.
Well, we embarked at Queenstown, and then we, I think the ship was called the Orcana, O-R-C-A-N-A. It was one of these old ships. All the men were in hammocks, and one of the duties of the officer of the watch, of the subaltern rather, on duty, was to go around at night, and in the daytime too, to see that the freshwater taps were not being turned on, because that was very precious, the fresh water. And it was very unpleasant at night crawling under the hammocks, men being sick, you see, and you would wonder if you could miss it or not. And they were touching, the hammocks were actually touching each other, and you had to crawl underneath to go and see the sentry over the tap.
Were officers better placed? Did you have bunks?
We had, yes, we were better placed. We had 2 or 3 in a cabin out. You know, we were, yes, pretty crowded, but we were a better place than that, I must admit. We arrived at Deur by train from Cape Town, and it was a big transit camp in those days, and got bigger and bigger as the time went on. And the first thing that happened to me personally was that I was sent on duty up with a half company to garrison or to look a copy, which was overlooking the camp. And if any enemy had been there, they could have shot us up without any difficulty. So with great difficulty, we climbed up this copy with my half company, and when I got to the top, I posted my sentries all round. And of course, I was mad keen in those days. I no thought of sleep or anything like that. I spent the night going round my sentries to make quite sure they were all awake, and this, that, and the other. And towards about some time before dawn, I got to one sentry who said, "Hush, sir, I hear something." So we listened very carefully, and we heard what we thought was somebody creeping up the copy, which was massive boulders, of course. And we were all ready and teed up to the last second, and suddenly, as the dawn came, all we saw were a few goats grazing in between the copies and picking up all they could find in the way of an odd bit of grass.
And you were poised to win the war at that moment,
We were then
sir.
poised then, of course, absolutely to start the war.
Yes.
By shooting anything we could see. But I had no luck, of course.
Mr. Packer, 2nd Middlesex Regiment.
When we went out there, we had white equipment. And the old general come round and he asked us if we'd come out on a picnic. And we had to...
General, who was that?
I couldn't say it. I forget his name now. There's so many generals there now. I couldn't say. He asked us if we'd come out on a picnic. And we had to boil coffee in Dixies. Each company had to boil Dixies in company and soak all our equipment in. My lovely white equipment, what I'd taken a pride in, a toe of woolage, went in the coffee pot.
To make them a sort of khaki colour?
Make them stain khaki. That was the first thing we had to do when we got to escort.
And that was a brief period of innocence for the British soldiers.
Well, the sons of the blood, the sons of the British Empire said goodbye to their dolly greys and moved northwards to do battle with Johnny Boer. And here is Johnny Boer, personified by dear old President Kruger.
Led by Lord Methuen, the Guards Brigade moved towards the Modder River. With them was our Mr. Gofton.
Well, it was a lovely morning, and you never dreamt that anything was coming. You couldn't see nothing. But we were opened out, you know, 5 and 6 paces out, you know. And then the poured a very heavy fire on us, and we just moved up once after that, and we lay there all day in the boiling sun.
While Mr. Gofton was lying there, the Highland Brigade moved forward in support. With them was Colonel Lang.
We started a march towards the, as we were told, march towards the Modder River. Well, we could see ahead of us that there were troops in battle order, you see, extended. So we started to extend, naturally. We weren't going to go up in formation like that. So we started to extend, and eventually we were mixed up with the Guards in the firing line. We couldn't get any further. I suppose we must have been about 800 yards from the actual river, but then the place was absolutely bare. You couldn't have, well, I don't think a rabbit could have hidden there. And the result was that anybody who moved was shot at once, because we never saw a Boer mark killed. They were very well camouflaged in their very deep trenches and with the trees, all in the trees. They saw us easy enough. We never saw them. Well, that went on for hours. We lay on our stomach there, men getting shot occasionally if they moved or anything happened. But it's extraordinary if you're lying down at a good distance away like that, what little cover is required for anybody, and you're perfectly prone, you see. And they can't pick you off very easily. unless you get up, and then they shoot you at once.
That was a day, I think, when there's been sovereigns offered for a drink of water, and a lot of people wouldn't believe that, but it happened in Africa, and not once, twice or thrice, a sovereign offered for a drink of water.
After a time, I personally got very bored with this, and I collected a few men to see if I can get round the flank in any way. Nobody told us to do anything. There were no orders or anything like that. And I crossed with some men at what they call, what we call the weir. And I tried to cross on the narrow brick portion, but unfortunately somebody was shooting at us, and it came so clear that I bobbed and I fell into the water, but that didn't matter very much. I scrambled out pretty quick. But the trouble was that my kilt got very wet, and the result was that the wet of the kilt and the dust on it, they cut the back of my knees, which had already been blistered by the sun, owing to the amount of time we'd been lying on our bellies in front of Modder River, probably for 5 or 6 hours, in this fierce sun on the back of the knee. And I suffered, the result of it was that after the battle I suffered far more from blistered, the back of blistered knees, raw, they were literally raw, than a slight wound that I got and paid no attention to whatever. However, that didn't very much matter. We got across, and we went up the Boer side of the river, and eventually I got to a sort of it was a little farmhouse, and there I found Major Irwin of my regiment, more or less collapsed, poor fellow. He had absolutely done in, and there was one man, he was dying on the kitchen table. As a matter of fact, he'd been shot through the stomach, poor fellow, and there was another wounded man there, and I think I had 3 unwounded fellows with me. And that night, we lay there, and the night came on, and we actually heard the Boers talking, calling out to each other, and then we heard them literally taking the guns away, which they did in the night. They took them away to Magersfontein. The next morning, of course, the troops advanced and found nobody there, and all the guns had already been taken to Magersfontein. I think personally that if we'd have managed to send a party round and mop them up on their side of the river, there would have been no Magersfontein. I think that would have finished them. Well, anyway, I wasn't going to be caught with a blistered back knees in the next battle, if there was another one. So I begged a pair of ladies' stockings out of the little store there was at Modder River, cut off the feet, and pulled them up over the back of my knees. And I didn't suffer from anything in Magersfontein, I can assure you. 1 or 2 fellows laughed at me. I said, yes, you try what it's like to have blistered back in the knees. You know, you don't mind doing something about it.
The glamour of soldiering had disappeared.
Oh, by that time, quite. Oh, yes. We were full of mud and filth by that time.
And so the British soldiers began to learn a long and bitter lesson, that the farmers of South Africa were not going to be a walkover, that they were natural and brilliant fighters, and unlike spear-carrying adversaries, were comparably armed, primarily with a Mauser rifle and the Martini Henry rifle and the Wesley Richardson, which is engraved, made specially for the South African Republic. Oh, it was not going to be easy this time.
Keep that flag a-flying, John Bull, there's no denying. You must keep that flag a-flying, John, 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 John. Say now you're the nation, now what a mighty nation, John Bull. John Bull, your empire's by your side.
The Battle of Modder River was a British defeat. It was not going to be easy this time. In Natal, the Boers drove the British army south of this Tugela River, leaving some 15,000 British soldiers isolated in this town of Ladysmith. And Mr. Hall was a Royal Engineer in that famous siege.
Mr. Hall, I have read that there was £1 million worth of supplies in Ladysmith. Do you think that the British chose to remain in Ladysmith to prevent these supplies falling into Boer hands?
Well, that must be hearsay.
It's not facts. Otherwise, why we would starving? Unless it was stuff that couldn't be eaten. Why we were eating horse flesh? Why did we finish up with 4 ounces of biscuits and 3 ounces of meal for a day? Why did they have to go down queue without slaughtering horses, 18 pence for the horse's heart?
A naval brigade from Her Majesty's ship Powerful had hastened far from the sea, pulling their 4.7 guns to help defend Ladysmith. On January the 6th, 1900, very early in the morning, the Boers delivered their do-or-die attack on the southern defences of Ladysmith. During this close assault on Wagon Hill, a young Royal Engineer, Lieutenant Digby Jones, made a name for himself to the extent of winning a Victoria Cross. Close by was Mr. Hall.
It is said that Digby Jones used his revolver, the butt of his revolver, and clobbered several of the Boers to death as they came over the top of the Sanger.
That's news to me, that's news to me. No, that's news to me.
He won the VC there.
That's right. Well, that's news to me then. I was there. I was in 50 yards of him.
Digby Jones won the VC 50 yards away from you.
Digby Jones stopped the stampede. And the trouble is, why did the Digby Jones have to stop the stampede? Where was these men's officers? Why didn't they do it? They panicked. Digby Jones got his eye on this, and he jumped on a big rock, threw his revolver. He said, the first man that passes me, I'll shoot him dead. Anyway, poor old Digby got it. Right through the throat.
Boer soldier, Mynheer Domesser.
Well, Wagon Hill was a key position. Once that is taken, well, then the whole Ladysmith lies open. Then the whole defense is finished. But Wagon Hill was very heavy to attack because the slopes are so high. They climb up, and then you really right into the trenches.
You Boers did get to the top, didn't you?
Yes. Some, not all.
And from a British point of view, it was very critical.
Yes. It was at one time very critical.
Of course, the Boers were very close, weren't they?
Oh, yes.
It was hand to hand at times.
They were within 150 yards. What? One old devil. De Villiers. He come over the top, tell us to surrender.
It lasted all day, right from dawn till about 5 o'clock that afternoon. Then a heavy storm of rain and thunder came down, so that one really couldn't see 20 or 30 yards in front of you. So heavy was that downpour.
No, we lost our own 2 lieutenants, sub-lieutenants. In the gun, we lost a sergeant, we lost a corporal, lost a lance corporal. That went on till about 4 o'clock at night. Then we heard a cheer.
The cheer came from the Devon Regiment, who, suffering heavy casualties, drove the Boers from Wagon Hill at the point of the bayonet, and thus saved the town of Ladysmith.
South of the Tugela River, a British army under General Buller had fought bitterly to cross that river, penetrate the mountains, and so relieve Ladysmith. The British had failed disastrously with heavy losses. Now, on January the 24th, 1900, Buller and his British soldiers were to try again. and it was decided that their objective was to be a mountain called Spion Kop. But their first problem was how to cross the Tugela River.
Of that battle, now then, we must go slowly, so that I don't cry. I don't want to cry. That was a very sad business, a cruel affair. They ran 2 by 2 onto the bridge, and they ran on and on. As soon as they were on our side of the bridge, they went to the ground. More and more came onto the bridge, and you could see another one going to the ground. Another one, and another one, and another one. The Boers were hiding in the hills, and they drove the English back.
Dat is die van Spioenkop af op.
Nee, daar niet. Daar is
Ja,
net
ja,
meer daar op die koppen.
There wasn't a second without shells bursting. Where I was, it wasn't so bad. But on the other side, hell man, that was bad. They were shooting like hell. Then later on, you could hear the bugle on the other side. And then at the place where the English had tried to cross, I would say a group of 15 or 20 would jump up and run towards Spioenkop. As they ran towards us, our people called, "There they come, there they come." At that time, we still had one of the old pom-poms. You know, one of those pom-pom machine guns. But he never did more than 3 shots, and then he jammed. In my section, the only thing you could hear was the constant noise of the rifle bolts. Rifle bolts going all the time. As soon as the bugle sounded, the English sprang up and ran towards Spioenkop. They kept coming on, and you could see them fall. And then, hearing the bugle again, they would jump up and keep on running towards Spioenkop. As soon as they fell to the ground, then you could hear. Then they jumped up, again at the bridge. There goes another one. There goes another one. You could see a helmet flying through the air, but still they kept on coming.
It was a very high mountain, you know. It must have took us nearly an hour to get up there. And some places were sheer rock. You had to bunk one another up. See? And, of course, it must have been about an hour before we came under fire.
Was it very bad where you were?
Yes, it was bad. It was that Boer's pom-pom gun that was doing all the damage there. And one officer, I know he wanted us to charge, see, one of our officers, it was, I forget his name now. I can't remember his names now. And I know we all got up to charge.
Fixed bayonets?
Fixed bayonets, yeah, and he, of course, he went down, he only just stood up and went down there, but 5 or 6 bullets hit him. Of course, that stopped the charge.
Meneer Botma, Boer soldier.
Now then, we took up our position on Spioenkop. I'm ashamed to say how many of us there were. 38.
There were only 38 when they got...
Now the natural ditch had rough grass, and we spread ourselves. 1 here and 2 there. And there 1 and there 2. There 3. Over a distance of at least a mile. And when we started shooting, the enemy thought there was 1,000 people.
Of course, a lot of British casualties on Spioenkop were through the head, weren't they?
Oh, yes. Well, it was chaps putting their head over the top, see. I would have done the same, see, only this Natal fella, what's Natal volunteers, are they?
Yes.
He told me what to do.
Imperial Light Infantry?
That was it, yes, Imperial Light Infantry. He told me, don't put your head over the top, he said, I know these buggers, he said, fire round the rock, he said. Not over the top, he said.
Because they were such fine marksmen, weren't they?
Yeah.
And if your head went above the rock, it was silhouetted.
Well, they had all the ranges taken, see. They knew the range as it was saying.
Did you see any of them on Spionkop?
Oh, yes. You'd see them around the rocks, see. We dodging from one rock to another and firing.
Were you close enough to the British soldiers to aim at individuals?
Yeah.
Yes, that time for us, 800 yards. It's as easy as you sitting there.
You can't miss them.
Michiel say you can't miss at 800 yards.
At what, 800?
Yes.
You can't miss them.
Would you like to have a bet?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Even as old as I'm today. My one eye is dead and the other one is going blind. And I'm also in a bad way. But I would take a bet on it at 800 yards. Put up a paper as big as a man. And I'm sure I could shoot right through him today. Now.
We went up there and was fighting all day and, well, until it got dark and somebody says we got to retire. It was about 10 of us there, all together there. And I didn't know what regiment they were. I didn't know whether it was my regiment or who. It's pitch dark. And there was blokes laying there wounded and they couldn't get a stretcher bearer. They was offering any money to get a stretcher bearer. Couldn't get one. They had to stop there then. We found out in the morning that same time as we were retiring, the boys were retiring. Yeah. And then we, of course, when we got down to the bottom of this Spionkop, and we stayed there the rest of the night. And one thing I know, there was a pool of water there. We thought it was good water. And of course we had a drink of it. We'd hadn't been up there all day with no water or anything, all in the broiling sun. And somebody come up and said, "You've been drinking that water?" So we said, "Yeah." I said, "They've been washing their wounds in that." We was glad to get it anyway.
Nou ja, die weet, nou moest ons die LSC, daarom hebben we nou die grachten opgemaakt.
Yes, you know, we had to dig graves on this side of Spionkop.
Van die Spionkop.
You know, against the side of the hill, near the British positions.
Die weet, toen moest ons...
We had to use the butt of the Mauser to dig the ground.
Moest ons grauw. En dan moest ons die grond wegkrap. Het is nou donker. Om nou die twee leken daarin te krijgen. Want ons was van...
We had to dig very quickly in order to get the bodies buried. Our people were in a hurry. It was already dark. We were planning to leave Spionkop. We had a canvas. We called it a grasshopper canvas. And we covered the dead with this and then threw earth over them. It was getting dark. It was night time. And we had to wait until it was light to see what to do. When morning came, one of the sentries came and said, "Do you know what? The enemy is fleeing." The English were fleeing. We didn't believe him. No, we didn't believe him. But as it got light, we saw them fleeing for no reason. And we were going to flee. Yes, we also had intended to flee. But now we held our positions for the time being. We buried our remaining dead, and later I went back to Ladysmith to my commando headquarters.
What were your feelings when you saw the first man you shot being hit?
Yes. How can I say it? You feel a little sorry for the man, for the soldier. You feel sorry for him. But the English, the name English, that you shoot. You feel sorry for the soldier that you must shoot. But if you don't shoot him, he shoots you.
Then General Buller and his British soldiers tried to break through to Ladysmith at Valkrans, and again were driven back with heavy losses. finally, poor old desperate Buller swung his army east of the old battlefield at Colenso, and for the first time threw his entire force at a single point. It was February the 28th, 1900. 25,000 British soldiers with 90 heavy guns pounded the 5,000 Boers defending the Peters Hill area. Boer bravery was not enough. Many died, and then the burghers were overwhelmed and broke.
I saw General Joubert standing on the bridge at Sondas River, trying to stop the burghers, trying to stop them, trying to organize them again and show defense. But he couldn't succeed. They pushed him aside, they really pushed him aside. And I remember the words he said, "May the heavens fall upon you." He was so disappointed. Again, there was there again the lack of discipline to listen to the commanders. The burghers were individualists.
And then it was fine nearly all night there, and it was pouring in torrents of rain. Rain was enough, pockets full of pockets, rain we was, and it poured in torrents all the night. And then when daylight came, we, of course, we marched into Ladysmith. And the first thing I noticed when we went in was the clock tower, the town hall. It had a shell right through it in the clock. And of course, and then we got in, we met a lot of these sailors. Had the guns, the powerful and the terrible. And they was all asking us how different places was in London, how, you know, it was getting on and all that there. Of course, they looked a bit starved-like, looked a bit white and that.
Did the people in Ladysmith give you a good reception when you arrived, the garrison?
Well, they cheered and all that, see, and didn't make much fuss of us, like. They was glad to see us, like, to relieve them, like.
The siege had lasted 117 days. Between General Buller's army in Natal and Lord Methuen army in the Cape, recovering from their losses at Modder River, was a third central army under General Gatacre.
What did the men think of your general, General Gatacre?
Well, his history was known before he joined us. Although his name was Gatacre, he was also well known as Backacre, the hard way he worked the troops.
Under General Gatacre, Mr. Rowden was present at an action strangely known as the Redisburg Mishap, and there he was taken prisoner.
Well, early morning, about daybreak, the Boer artillery, which consisted of 5 guns captured at Sannes Post, was
from
used...
the British. Captured at Sannes Post earlier from the British.
4 days previous from the British. And they used those guns against us. We had only rifles, therefore helpless. The Boers didn't make any great attack on foot. But the way our forces were scattered in the hills, they were picked up piecemeal until eventually we were all captured. A particular incident concerning myself was when I got up from my position, which I occupied overnight. Everything seemed quiet, and I got up to see what is going on. And there I found myself being covered by a bow, actually aiming at me. I couldn't do anything. And the other man that I saw there was at the time, he had to put his rifle down. From there,
May I ask one question? Have you ever thought to yourself why that boar didn't pull the trigger and kill you?
Well, I should say he was a very humane man. Evidently had no hatred in us as a Britisher. Therefore, he didn't pull the trigger. I can't think of any other reason.
What sort of a man refused to pull the trigger on Mr. Rowden from Newcastle in England? Hope for the survival of the good spirit in man lies with that boor, and not with the milners, chamberlains, and kitcheners of this world. So, disaster followed disaster for the British. The Boers who had shattered the Guards' brigade at the Battle of Modder River now waited watchfully in the Magersfontein Hills. Watching and waiting with them was Mr. Westhuizen, Cape rebel volunteer fighting with the Boers, and I asked Mr. Westhuizen what was the first intimation that he had had that the British might advance again.
What did you first see or feel?
The bombardment, you see. The day, Sunday afternoon, the balloon went up. A man in the balloon, he was looking at our positions. What did he see? I don't know. But we fired thousands of rounds at him. But sometimes they brought him out for us for a time, then he goes up again. Now he was directing the guns. And that we come to the conclusion that they will attack tomorrow. Then every man that was away and was brought into the trenches that night.
The British Army did prepare to advance, this time led by the Highland Brigade. And with the Highland Brigade was our friend Colonel Lang, then in 1899, Lieutenant Lang of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders.
We marched out in the middle of the afternoon, full daylight, in absolutely full view of the Boers, who were sitting on Magersfontein Hill opposite, with very good field glasses. They could have counted the number of soldiers that left Modder River. We marched through the night in wet weather. These awful wait-a-bit trees that broke us up in massacre column, which is nothing more or less than a sort of a crowd that you'd have at a football match. Everybody touching everybody else in all practical purposes after dark. And we went on and on and on, and we lay down at about midnight. It was raining, thoroughly miserable. We were kicked up again and told to go on. We went on, stumbled on. Nobody knew where the hell they were going, of course. And eventually, we suddenly were facing one way, and on our left flank, we were fired into by the Boers. That started the Magersfontein show. Well, nobody could use a rifle only because we were touching each other. One massacre column. And the only people that could have done it were the fellows on the left, and they were shot down, you see, the fellows on the left, because that's where the fire came in. And the result was, of course, we reeled off to the right. I was knocked down personally. I don't know how many people were on the top of me at one moment. Everybody's falling off to the right. At any rate, I got up and we more or less scattered towards the right. And we stopped, of course, after a very short time. And then we had to collect the fellows. I got hold of a piper and got him to play the regimental march. And I collected a few fellows, and with another officer of my regiment called King, who unfortunately was killed quite near to me a few moments afterwards. And we went into the bushes where we were being attacked by the Scandinavians. Now, the Scandinavians were jolly brave fellows. They came right round our flank.
They were volunteers.
Oh,
on
they
the
were all
Boer side.
volunteers for the Boers. Oh, yes. But it was rather interesting in a way because there were all these bushes, you see, and they got behind bushes and they potted at us. Then somebody would say, there he goes. And up we'd jump and shoot him. Probably poor devil would have about 3 or 4 into him. Anyway, we wiped them out. We had a hell of a time.
Did you know during the fighting that the commanding officer of the Highland Brigade was dead?
No, I had no idea. I didn't even know my CO had been killed. Oh, it's an awful, terrible schmozzle, the whole thing. Mind you, the whole thing was very badly planned. To do an attack like that, going out in full view of the enemy. Damn silly thing to do, I thought.
Mynheer Koekemoor, who is now 103 years old, remembers the Scottish kilts.
Yeah.
Yes, oh yes. The first we saw were those with skirts.
Skotse.
Those were all shot dead. Not one left. All shot dead.
What were your feelings, Colonel, at this sudden slaughter of the Highland Brigade?
Well, it's rather difficult at this stage to say, but I don't honestly remember that one was terribly upset insofar that one felt, well, you can't go on yourself, because it all seemed a part of the show. You knew jolly well you couldn't have a battle without losing somebody, and it was merely a matter of luck whether you got hit yourself or whether you didn't. But I don't remember that. Of course, we very much missed fellows. When a fellow's killed in battle, you naturally miss him, don't you? Straight away. But it's amazing how quickly they're forgotten, not forgotten, but replaced. Reinforcements come up, officers go down sick or wounded or die of disease, reinforcements come up and take their place, and life goes on the same as ever. There's really no time to mope at all. In fact, I think the Air Force are the people who would tell you that. Well, these poor fellows who went out in bomber command at night and never turned back in the morning, I believe they were amazing the way they stood it. I can't understand how they did it. Their pals never coming back in the morning. But it's rather different, I think, with us, because, anyway, we did find them, as a rule. We found whoever was killed. We did find the fellow.
Were you present, sir, at the burial of the dead of the Highland Brigade?
Yes, I was present at one mass burial, which is very, very unpleasant, because, mind you, these are men been lying out. We'd found them after some time, and you know what the sun does to a man who's been lying out in the sun for some time, one thing and another. It was very, that was very unpleasant. I must admit, I can remember it to this day. This long trench. It was a mass burial, and the men were simply laid there in rows, without any covering, of course, but just as they stood, and in all sorts of shapes and that sort of sort. It was a very unpleasant, well, rather unpleasant sight altogether. And, well, there it is. The life had to go on, which it did.
The battles of Colenso, Modder River, Magersfontein, Stormberg, Spienkop, Valkrans had all been fought. And all of these battles had been British defeats. Throughout the British Empire, the culmination of this period was known as Black Week. You see, we British then ruled 1/4 of the Earth's surface. We controlled all of the oceans with the biggest fleet that the world has ever seen, and now Boers, farmers, were giving British soldiers a monstrous beating. Jealous foreigners went wild with delight. England could not lose the war, must not lose the war. Field Marshal Lord Roberts of Kandahar, whose only son had just been killed at the Battle of Colenso, with Kitchener of Khartoum as his chief of staff, sailed for South Africa. From here at Aldershot, the old military centre of England, and indeed from all over the British Empire, troops landed at South Africa in overwhelming numbers. Lord Roberts marshalled his mighty army and drove the Boers of Modder River and Magersfontein fame before him. Soon some 5,000 of those Boers under their old General Cronje were trapped along the banks of the Modder River at a place called Paardeberg.
Directly we got there, we knew he was in the river. Without any reconnaissance, as far as we certainly had no reconnaissance, we started to attack. Well, of course, we couldn't see where we were going. We didn't know where the hell he was. And we lost a certain number of men.
Who was responsible for that?
Well, I don't know. Kitchener was in command. Lord Roberts hadn't arrived. I think Lord Roberts was seedy or something. You know, he would have been left behind, I think. You know, he hadn't arrived, I know that. Because later on, Kitchener gave our ex-commanding officer, Colonel Hannay, who was then commanding the mounted infantry, an order to charge the laager on mounted infantry, which he did, with, and he and another officer of my regiment called Lieutenant Courtney, they were both killed. And I suppose trying to get in on mounted infantry, which is, of course, rather silly, because they're certainly not trained for charging on horseback.
I understand that this engendered considerable anger against Kitchener.
Well, I think so. I think he was a bit too hasty. You see, they didn't in those days, as far as I can see now, looking back, they didn't do what we call much reconnaissance. They didn't find out, I mean, before we went bluntly at it, when we went straight at it, like we did at Modder River.
But Lord Roberts stopped the blind brutality of Kitchener and besieged the trapped Boers.
So we simply sat round him. After, I think it was about 9 or 10 days, he surrendered. My company was sent down into the laager as a sort of guard of honor, or guard at any rate. And the stench down there. Dead mules, dead oxen, dead people, everything scattered all over the place. The stench was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. We didn't stop there very long. I think I picked up a pom-pom shell, which I sent home to my people, having taken the cap off and that sort of thing. And, but there was nothing to be, no loot to be got there, certainly not.
At Paardeberg, old General Cronje surrendered to Lord Roberts. Some 4,000 Boers were made prisoner and were taken south to prison camps at Cape Town, and from there were dispatched to the island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic Ocean. The Boers were a small nation. This loss appeared to some a crushing blow.
Toen ik nou daar in die oorlog in was en dat ik die affaire gezien, toen ik bij mijzelf...
When I was in the war and saw how things developed, I wondered if there couldn't be a change, because I saw a dark situation. It was when I was in the veld with my commander that I saw the handling of affairs and what was going on. What I saw, and remember I was still a child, what I saw seemed to me that this way things could never work out. As matters were going, it would lead to disaster, and it did.
And then we finally marched into Bloemfontein on the 15th of March. We marched in with pipes playing. The regiment marched into Bloemfontein. The actual cavalry, I think, had come in the day before. That was the capture of the capital of the Orange Free State in those days. And on the 16th of March, the next day, Lord Roberts declared the colony called Orange River Colony. and the word Orange Free State was abolished.
President Steyn. There was General de Wet. There was General de la Rey. General Botha I've mentioned. And Paul Kruger, the president, came up too, trying to stop the burghers, the commanders, from falling back. Well, they did not succeed. Not even Paul Kruger. The bombs were falling near Paul Kruger, and General de Wet came up to him and begged him to retreat, for God's sake, because I can't protect you, and I don't want to see you killed here. But I must mention this fact. There was a certain amount of demoralization, but the way of fighting was a bit altered at that time. To take up a defense position with against an army of 60,000 men was regarded as useless. So really, to my mind, I think that from that time, the guerrilla war was started at that date at Kulsat.
Lord Robert's army now advanced with a terrible massed authority. With newfound confidence, British soldiers headed for Pretoria.
There's a preference in toys always shown by tiny boys, and that's a box of soldiers every time. On the gun and scarlet coat, how the youngster seems to dote as he puts them through their paces into line. They are the toys that won't be played with. Bowmen will find them hard to break. Steady and true, ready to do, always wide awake. Brave hearts, stout hearts when the fight's begun. Gay hearts, light hearts when the battle's won. They're not a mighty crowd, but old England's mighty proud of the Queen's own little box of soldiers.
The Boer guerrilla leaders de Wet, de la Rey and Botha became heroes all over the world. Even here in England they engendered a warm respect, and as you can see, they inspired war games. 1, 2, 3. For or Britain. Yes, they hit the British and were gone. The vast British army and the system of British blockhouses which wove across southern Africa failed to hold them. But often it was a very near thing.
General Botha was very annoyed with Colonel Benson because he treated, according to what I've heard, women and children in very bad manner. General Botha decided to attack his force, but he could not gather more than at the outside figure 500 men. It may be less, but make it 500 men. And he decided to attack Benson with 500 men. Now you must remember that we had no cannon, we had no ambulances, and no doctors, and very scarce ammunition. Bandoliers, some of the men went into that battle with only 10 or 15 rounds. And their strong force. Well, I remember that the command came, storm, that is charge. And the whole commando of General Botha went forward, spread over a long line, and they attacked the center of Benson's column. The Tommies, we call them the Tommies, they were lying amongst the dead mules, where it's very difficult for us to spot them. Benson was wounded, died afterwards there. He couldn't save his guns. And towards the end, I think it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I was wounded, first forearm here and then afterwards the shoulder. But I stayed there. I didn't go back because it was just as dangerous to retreat from the place as to stay there. So that is a battle there, again, of, as I've said, at the outside 500 men attacking a very strong armed column of 3,000 men. And that showed a great amount of courage on the Boer part, because we must remember there were no doctors, no ambulances. When you're wounded, you're left at the mercy of the enemy, and attacking with only a round of 10 bullets, bandolier. That, I think, showed a great amount of confidence and courage. Getting away from the Battle of Bargenlaagte now, I want to tell you this. But I've often said it. I'm always afraid to say it because it sounds so absolutely unbelievable that men wounded, severely wounded, got on their horses and recovered from those wounds. Now, as Commandant van Niekerk shot through the ankle, got on his horse, we bandaged him as fast as possible, well, he recovered. There was Phil Cornet, Koos van der Walt, shot through the hip, threw him on his horse, rode off, wound. So men that were wounded never thought about going to, because there were no hospitals, there were no ambulances, there were no doctors. Now I must say this, that in spite of the Geneva Convention, the Red Cross Geneva Convention, the English took away all our ambulances and all our doctors, which was contrary to the terms of the Geneva Convention, for which they were a member, so we were members.
Who do you think was guilty of that sort of behavior?
I think it's the Commander-in-Chief.
What was his name?
Well, I think it was Kitchener.
The British are just like a crocodile pest. It's the water they always force you to. They throw you on a ship for a long, long trip. Only God and the Queen know where to. Bring my terug naar die Transvaal, daar waar my Sari woon. Daar onder in die milies, by die groen doringboom, daar woon my Sari Maree.
A great part of the guerrilla war was fought by the volunteer yeomen of Great Britain. Mr. Saunderson fought with the Northumberland and Durham Imperial Yeomanry.
We were escorting a convoy, and the major was in command, and I was his dispatch rider, and he sent me with the dispatch to tell our guns to retire because the convoy had got saved behind the koppies. I galloped up to the guns, and going up they were being heavily shelled, I dismounted to hand the note to tell the officer in charge of the gunners to retire. They've got to initial it, and you've got to pick it up, take it back to your officer, so to be in there with it. After I got it back initialed, I was just getting onto my horse when the shell burst. Segment shell, and took it out. My hat here.
Was that the hat that you were actually wearing?
That's the hat that I actually wore. I've taken care of it ever since. Took that out there. Another piece went across my cheek. Skinned me ear. And the ear bleeds very heavily then did. Another piece skinned the back of me right hand. And my horse was knocked about and killed. And my rifle was bent like that. And the foresight of the rifle was knocked actually off, clean off. And that was that.
There would be a party of Boers, again, this same party, coming down the left flank. Would be about maybe 30 of them. It was a lot in those days, under those conditions. Anyhow, the shell, the Royal Horse Artillery, Royal Field Artillery, the 5 or 18 pounders. And one shell landed just about 100 yards at the rear of this group. The next one, mind they're all moving away, will be about 50 yards behind them. And the next one, right amongst them. A glorious sight to us.
Now, Lord Bethune was driving the Boers on to us with our wagons. They were coming galloping along, and his pom-pom shells was just coming in behind them. When we got the order to independent firing with magazines, and as soon as we opened fire, the Boers tossed their hands up like that and surrendered. We rushed out to pick up the rifles, and one or two of them, seeing there were so few of us, began jumping on the horses and galloping away. And Tommy Cairns, a brig, was standing next to me, and he shot one getting into the saddle and rolled him onto his back. Tommy Cairns went forward. The first thing you do with a dead boy is to feel what he's got in his pocket. Cougar pennies was worth £1 because there was some gold in the cougar penny. So to said, Tommy Cairns put his hand in the Boer's pocket, and the Boer opened his eyes. He said, "Oh, I beg your pardon, I thought you were dead," says Tommy Cairns. He didn't like everybody was looking at him.
General Buller, Field Marshal Lord Roberts of Kandahar, Kitchener of Khartoum, and their great army could not defeat the farmer soldiers of the Boer republics. So we British decided on a scorched earth policy. We rounded up the Boer women and children and the old men and put them into what we called concentration camps. And then we burnt the Boer farms. The British concentration camps and the burning of Boer farms was perpetrated in a spirit of British imperial desperation. Lord Roberts and Lord Kitchener failed to defeat the Boer nation on the battlefields, so they struck elsewhere.
Did you actually see women and children being removed?
Helped to do it.
What was that like?
Oh, horrible. Horrible, heartbreaking. To us as youths, it wasn't right at all, but you had to do it.
Why did you have to do it?
Orders. Orders.
Emily Hobhouse was an English woman who traveled to South Africa at her own initiative to look at these concentration camps. And she was horrified at what she saw. And she proceeded to fight the apparently inhuman Tory government at Westminster. And a commission of inquiry was set up, comprised of a committee of ladies. And afterwards, conditions were much improved. Mr. Olofse was a child of 8 years in one of these concentration camps, and he told us about Emily Hobhouse and other things.
Well, as far as I know today, insofar as I have read in books and what I heard from my parents, as they naturally knew her, they regarded her as a holy angel. So good was she to the people. She was a well-doer. They regarded her as an angel out of heaven. The people who died in the camps, I cannot say for sure because those days I was a child, but I know that the women and children died like flies. What the English did to them, I cannot say. I don't want to say things of which I know nothing, but I just know the death rate was terrible.
Maar ek weet net die sterfgevalle was vreeslik.
But many people died, many. I had 3 sisters and 2 mothers that died. 1 stepmother and my own mother that died in the camps.
At Bloemfontein in the Republic of South Africa, there is a great memorial devoted to those dead women and children. An integral part of that memorial is devoted to the English woman, Emily Hobhouse. In those British concentration camps, something between 20 and 30,000 old men, women and children died of enteric fever, pneumonia, measles, etc., etc. And it is proper for us to remind ourselves that we would not have been fighting that war at all if there had been no gold at Johannesburg. Have we changed? Do we still sell people for business reasons? White people or black people? Do we?
When first I went a soldier with rifle on my shoulder, there wasn't no one bolder in the corps, boys, oh. And when I walked abroad, all the pretty girls would wink at me. The ladies can't resist a jolly soldier. Bang upon the big drum, clash upon the cymbals. We'll sing as we go marching along, boys, along. And although on this campaign there's no whiskey or champagne, still we'll keep our spirits flowing with a song, boys. And now I'll say goodbye, for I'm feeling rather dry, and I see a comrade waiting with his song, boys, oh. So here's good luck to all, and promotion soon and better money. That's the sort of ticket for a soldier.
But the ordinary British soldier was as clean in spirit as you'll find anywhere, and if he had weaknesses, they were relatively small human weaknesses. Mr. Saunderson on the subject of loot.
We were coming along past Cronje's house one day, when I was in Vaux's machine guns.
Whereabouts was that in South Africa?
I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you where it was, exactly where it was. I couldn't tell you. But only Vaux detailed me to go. He said, go and look after their house until the niggers get all past, because it mustn't be looted. 2 of us went to look after the house. When the convoy got past, everything got past, I said, we're going to have a look inside, see what there is. And when we got inside, there was this claret jug.
What, that one on the table?
That claret jug on the table. And of course, I just strapped it onto my wallet and came away with it as a souvenir. That's what it was.
And that came out of this?
Cronje's house.
You took that from General Cronje's house?
That's right.
How did you get it back to England?
Well, luckily, I had a skin rug. And I filled first of all with ostrich feathers for Mother. And then I had a skin rug, and I wrapped it in the skin rug and tied it up in the Morpeth Herald.
Which had been sent out to you from?
Yes, it had been sent to me from Morpeth, and it got home safely. There you are.
Well. You mean you sent that through the post?
All the way from the veld.
General Cronje's... I hope no relatives of General Cronje are going to see this film. They might want it back, you know.
Well, you never know.
They'll have to come and get it.
You'll have to come and see it, yes.
The Boers became skilled train wreckers. Meneer Prinsloo on the subject.
Look, all of us, we lay and waited there, you see. And when the train came, the shell hit it. The engine turned over and we all stormed the train.
Yeah.
The engine in front and the trucks behind were on fire.
Yeah.
The train was on its side, and there were a few women who got hurt. 2 of them were killed. And with the overturning of the train, a few soldiers were also killed. But we didn't stop to look at that. We just looted what food and clothes we could get. And I got this army coat. A friend got a jacket and trousers, another a blanket. There were about 20 of us, and we all grabbed what we could. We really looted the whole train.
And you wore it for the rest of the war, did you? Het oom dit gedragen gedurende de rest gedurende die oorlog?
No, when my father heard what had happened, he wouldn't let me wear it, because he said if the British caught us wearing their clothes, we would be shot dead. He told me to burn it. So I went and buried it in a tin drum, and when peace came, I went and got it out. And this is the coat.
The fighting Boers became desperate for medicine, food and clothes. Mr. Goud, Royal Engineer.
I felt a bit tired and I laid down my back against the wall after I finished it and went to sleep. Next thing I knew, I felt something poking me ribs. So I looked up, there was 3 Boers looking at me. So one of the fellows could speak English quite well. He says, "Where's your gun?" I said, "I forgot it." He said, good job for you. He says, "We don't shoot unarmed men." I thought, that's all right. I was only a boy, mind you. Then he said, "All right, take your clothes off." So I looked at him, "What for?" He said, "Take your clothes off. We want them." He says, "Don't we look like it?" They was all in rags, you know. They'd store up around their feet for boots. So I had to strip, of course, and he took every damn thing from me. I was in my birthday suit. He said, "Now you go and join your mates." I says, "Like this." So one of them threw me a sack. He'd been using it as a coat. So I put it on, but I soon took it off. Because I'd had more residency than I wanted to be. Oh, it's full of lice.
This morning in a busy street, a tiny lad I spied, with paper hat and little wooden sword slung by his side. Said I, "Good morning, General," in a playful sort of way. "I see by your appearance you're preparing for the fray." He stood up to attention, looked at me with flashing eye, then gripped his little wooden sword as he made this reply. "The Boers have got my daddy, my soldier dad. I don't like to hear my mammy sigh. I don't like to see my mammy cry. So I'm a-going in a big ship across the raging main. And I'm a-going to fight the Boers, I am, and bring my daddy home again."
And there was a temporary hospital put up, and our losses, our killed and wounded were put in this, and those who lost their lives, unfortunately, they were sewn up in a blanket, which charged against their account by the government.
They were charged?
Yes, a man had to pay, yes, out of, when he got his settling up money, there was the price of the blanket was deducted from any credit due to him.
That doesn't speak too well for England, does it?
That happened out there.
I believe that when an officer was buried, they did put a Union Jack over him. That was the difference.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Well, there's no Union Jack put over the Tommies.
Did you lose many personal friends close to you?
Well, there were 6 of us chummed up on a boat going out, and 5 of them was killed. There was 3 shot in the head and spine cock killed, and there was 1 got killed at Land's Neck, a chap named Charlie Davis. He got killed at Land's Neck, and another little fella got killed at Fort Itola. Do you know Fort?
I know of it, sir, yes.
Yeah, well, he got killed there. That was while guerrilla warfare was on.
So out of you 6 friends?
I was the only one that left.
The
tenacity and courage of the Boer people became unbelievable. They were never able to raise many more than 45,000 soldiers throughout the war, including old men and boys. Against them, England sent well over 450,000, nearly 500,000 soldiers. And the Boers were still fighting, mainly in rags and in hunger, after nearly 3 years. Mr. Van Wyk, then a young Boer officer, fought in one of the last battles on April the 10th, 1902.
So their commander rode into Heidelberg and threw away their arms. But most of the men there was a little copy. Said, surrender my rifle. Never. So they smashed them to pieces, the rocks, threw them away. One old Umi, as we call him, said, "Oh no, what? I've taken this rifle from the khakis, says old Medford. I'll just go and hand it back to them." Do you see?
Yeah.
But others, no.
The Boers had been forced to accept dehumanized peace terms. Simply, it was unconditional surrender leading to total loss of sovereignty for the two proud republics.
What did you think of the peace terms?
I think it's fair.
You Boers have a lot of charity in you.
Well, what can we do? People were looking on us, not people, but all the big powers of the world were looking at us like that to grab, you see.
The gold.
The gold. The gold.
When you got back to the farm, what was it like?
Only the walls were left, burnt black. There was no roof, no beams. There was nothing left on the earth. There was just a farm. Even the fruit trees were burnt. Just dead wood.
Could you describe your arrival home as a happy time?
Well, we were a happy family, that was certainly. But things have changed altogether. It was a family farm. It wasn't burned down, but there were no windows and there were no doors. Why? I don't know. They've just made fire on.
Do you remember when you arrived home what your mother said to you?
Oh, to school.
Have you ever thrown your mind back, though, to 1899, I mean now, in your old age, as to whether that war should have been fought by us or not? Have you?
What was the alternative? I think in those days, you know, we were colonizing people. We owned half Africa. You look at the old maps. The Union Jack was everywhere. Where is it now? Not a damn place. I think Rhodesia was the last place, and they've hauled that down now. Not a single Union Jack to be seen anywhere. But in those days, it was natural for us to own the world. We had the biggest fleet in the world. We owned it. Look at India. Look at India. We owned India. But we win it all up. In those days, we had a different idea of the whole thing. We were Lord God's Almighty, weren't we?
But there is one final question unanswered. In the Republic of South Africa, in the middle of the old Transvaal, I asked Mrs. Domisser, wife of Domisser, Boer soldier, can't we say now, today, that you Boers did win in the end?
Well, finally they did. May I just say something else? That is just my private opinion. The war, this English war in South Africa, was the stupidest war the English ever waged. for this reason. All that they achieved was the consolidation of the Afrikaner people, right from the tip of the Cape to furthest boundary of Transvaal. It gave, afterwards, it gave to the world a new nation, the Afrikaner nation, and a new language, the Afrikaner language. And that language and that nation is to the English die-hard a thorn in their flesh, just as our die-hards a thorn in our flesh. For the rest, we work together and we live in peace. And we work together for the good of this beautiful land of ours.
Simbamba, mama's a kinky. Simbamba, mama's a kinky. Draai sy nek om, gooi hom in die sloot, trap op